I chose not to take the COVID shot, and because of that, I was forced out of the military. They're still being punished for a decision they had to make a few years ago.
Wow.
My faith is the most important aspect of who I am. And it's not just enough to have faith. Faith without works is dead. It was 9/11, being near DC during 9/11 to see the attacks and to want to defend my country. I decided to go to Special Forces selection, went through that course and ended up at 7 Special Forces Group.
How do we engage the youth to have the intent to serve their country?
We need to be trying to influence the youth to serve and to love their country. Family is the basic building block of society. Our diversity isn't our strength. Our unity of mission, our unity of effort is what makes us successful.
Before we get started, please subscribe so that you never miss an episode of our cutting-edge contemporary conversations. Thank you.
Hi John, how are you?
Good, how are you, Dev? Thanks
Doing
for having me.
Thanks for coming around, and thanks for sitting with me today and sharing your story. Before, I have so many conversations to be, in my head to be talking about on multiple topics, but can you briefly talk about your background and your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I most recently was a Special Forces Green Beret. So I was assigned to 7 Special Forces Group. I joined the military in 2011. I commissioned because I loved my country and wanted to serve my country. And after commissioning, I ended up going and spending some time in the Catholic seminary, so my faith is very important to me.
Yeah.
So I just kind of have those two backgrounds of being a very faithful Catholic and also just loving my country and serving as a Green Beret.
Wow. Could you talk a bit more about, as you were growing up, where did you get the intent of serving your country? How do you bring that spirit that I want to serve my homeland?
So ever since being young, I've been extremely ideological. I always thought about how do I use the gifts that God gave me to make a difference for the greatest good. And I remember seeing costumes, Halloween costumes with me dressed as a soldier. My dad, he was a police officer, so that gave me a sense of wanting to serve. My stepdad, he was in the military, so that gave me that sense as well. And I just thought that with the desire to serve my country, with the leadership gifts, the gifts physically, that all of these interests kind of just lined up where military service was probably the best option for me making that difference in the world.
As you were a younger boy, and did you had some initial hints of serving by doing stuff within your school system or within your church or within your family and your community? Could talk more about the serving you have done within those growing years?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always been very involved in the church, and I ended up converting to Catholicism when I was 15, but even before then, remember going on mission trips. Like I went to a mission trip to Belize where we helped the poor people who weren't as privileged to build a school or to build a church. I remember being involved in the youth group, helping to serve the homeless community in Los Angeles. And then later on, going and joining the seminary. And when I was a seminarian studying for the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C., helping out at nursing homes, as well as teaching young students. So service has been always an important part of my life.
That leads to the next one. When you talk about your faith, how has your journey been to your faith, growing up, and how has that journey looked for you? And how does the marriage of faith and service happens in your head and in your life?
My faith is the most important aspect of who I am. Being a Christian, being a friend of Christ is the most important defining part of me. And in knowing and having a deep personal relationship with Him, God is love. And that love has to be diffusive of itself. That means that I have to take the love that God has given me and share it with the rest of the world. So it's not just enough to have faith. Faith without works is dead. So you have that faith, but then you go on ahead and you do those charitable works as God calls you to within your specific situation. And for me, it's living it out in daily life through prayer, through going to Mass, as if you're able to go on a daily basis doing that. It's also what you choose to do for work. How do you choose to help serve your community or provide value through your community? And then when you have those extra opportunities to maybe teach an adult faith formation class or to serve the poor or something of that nature, that's what you should do as God dictates.
Talk a bit more on the decision making, and as you're a young boy and young man, to serve your country, and how has that journey and how has that matured?
So I knew I wanted to go into the military since I was in high school. Before then I had inklings of it, but it was living with my family at Fort Belvoir. It was 9/11, being near DC during 9/11 to see the attacks and to want to defend my country that made me absolutely sure that I wanted to serve the military. So Initially, I looked at service academies and then decided to go into ROTC, which is the Reserve Officer Training Corps. That allows you to be a student, but also to train to prepare to be a military officer. So I did Army ROTC at Wheaton College in Illinois, during which time I thought I was going to go into combat arms, but God had different plans. I felt that God was potentially calling me to be a Catholic priest. As such, after commissioning in 2011, I went directly into the chaplain candidate program. That's a program where you are allowed to defer your educational requirements to study and to get whatever extra degree to get to that next step. So for me, it was going to Catholic seminary for potentially 6 years and then coming back in the Army on active duty. However, I discerned that God was not calling me to the priesthood. I did 4 years of seminary, and after doing those 4 years of seminary, discerning that wasn't God's call, I went on active duty as an infantry officer. So my military journey really started on active duty in September of 2015. So I went to the Infantry Basic Officer Leadership course, Ranger School, Airborne School, then decided to go to Special Forces, so went to that selection, went through that course, which is a couple years long, and ended up at 7 Special Forces Group in 2020.
Wow. And what are you doing currently with your life, and then what are the goals you're focusing on?
So unfortunately, much of the world suffered under COVID, and they didn't suffer so much just because of the virus. They suffered from a disease that was worse than the cure that most governments tried to do, and that was government totalitarianism and taking the power away from the people. And as a service member, the military, the U.S. military, tried to mandate and require every service member to take the COVID shot, the COVID vaccine. I chose not to take the COVID shot, and because of that, I was forced out of the military, and I left July of last year. I've spent the last 9 months since leaving the military in advocating on behalf of service members who've been negatively impacted by the COVID vaccine. I've gone on interviews, I've written op-eds, I've gone up to Washington, D.C. on multiple occasions to try to advocate for these service members, to try to push for congressmen to do the right thing, to put in laws to help them out, to have hearings to raise awareness on this. And though it's been somewhat successful, just not enough, because service members, they're still being punished for a decision they had to make a few years ago.
Wow. And in that advocacy work which you're doing in terms of being the voice for the service members, how has that journey been? Is it difficult, and how has this journey been talking to multiple type of people, which you were very in one direction, you were just serving your country. There was only one spirit or one intent you had, but now you have to think about in multiple angles when you're talking to multiple media houses, a congressman, or any other person. So how has that evolved, and what are the learnings you have learned in that process of advocacy?
So although it is a totally different world, I feel as though God has placed me in this position, and He has given me the capabilities to properly advocate for service members. One, He gave me the seminary formation and that kind of faith formation to really understand morality, philosophy, ethics. And on the other hand, He's given me the Special Forces Green Beret training. That includes military training, planning. It includes ways of trying to use psychological operations to influence other people. So in a sense, everything that God has done for me has helped me up until the step. So it's been a challenge, it's been a unique change, but I've definitely enjoyed making my own schedule, figuring out what ways do I share information to move the populace, to move the needle a little bit further. At first, you have to talk about the military vaccine mandate as a readiness issue. After that, you can talk about it being illegal. Then you can talk about people being injured by the supposed COVID vaccine. So it's definitely a challenge. You have to deal with a wide variety of people who have varying intents. However, I think even with politics, you have to just remember, as long as both parties are benefiting from it, you move the ball forward to get whatever answer you both want.
I want to ask you, because you had a fair breadth of journey, how do we engage the youth to have the intent to serve the country? How might we create an environment, an ecosystem in which the youth feels that there is an inherent need to think about nationalism to start with, and to think about that this is my primary or moral responsibility to do?
That's an excellent question, and we need to be trying to influence the youth to serve and to love their country. So you have to make sure that, one, they have a love for their country, that they understand that it's something worth fighting for. The values have to be taught at home. I think one of the reasons why we're having so many value problems within our culture is the vast number of divorces happening. We know that families where a father and a mother are present that stay together, the children are more successful. So trying to push forward policies or to encourage people to stay together, to get married, have kids, stay together, to educate their children properly, to tell them what is right and wrong. And right now, we have liberals that just don't understand what right and wrong is. If they can't understand what a man is, what a woman is, if they think it's okay to kill a child up until the point that it's born, that's absolutely unsatisfactory. It's delusional. We need to fight against this. We need to try to pass our values on to our children, and we need to be the examples of the service that we want others to do. A lot of people complain about the problems in the world, but there's a lot more complaining, but there needs to be a lot more doing. So anyone who doesn't like the situation, they need to look in the mirror and they need to ask themselves, better than the mirror, they need to go in prayer to God and say, God, what do you want me to do in this particular situation? What gifts, talents, interests have you given me, and how are you calling me to help improve this world, to make it better for my children and my children's children?
A lot of time, the language of being a multicultural community and a multicultural pot or a melting pot is being used very broadly. But if you talk about the reason why families are important for any part of communities, and then many people of faith, communities and cultures will talk about the value of the family to support that basic denomination of a functioning civil society. And how do you see, and as you have very correctly or very specifically identified, family is one of the reasons we could create that sense of nationalism, sense of moral reasoning to serve your country. How is that different communities and cultures to bring that knowledge of the family to bring it more up in the conversation in the public space?
I think that everyone needs to acknowledge that the family is the basic building block of society. In a sense, it's actually the first government, where you have the father and the mother as the head of the household, the mother who's assisting in raising of the children who are learning from the parents and are being raised to be good citizens. And these are factories for good citizens. That's the way of thinking about it. And these families have to have shared cultures with other families. We have to have the same value systems. So looking at what the U.S. was established to be, it's a government for the people, by the people, of the people, where we are trying to govern each other, where the government is supposed to secure our rights, but in order to do that, in order to get life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, you have to have that sense of freedom. So really, the families, they need to continue to try to instill those values within their children. And multiculturalism is good as long as there is that basic same set of values. Whenever there's a great disagreement, so you couldn't have American society and Afghanistan perfectly mixing. Us going over to Afghanistan, one of the problems is we were trying to bring democracy over there. Well, their value system doesn't support democracy in the same way that it is supported in the United States. So it's a beautiful thing to have multiculturalism. There are many things that I love to learn from different cultures, Hispanic cultures. I know Spanish, it's great. But there has to be that shared set of values, or else we're going to be opposing. And as a military man on a Special Forces detachment, we all have to have that same mission, intent, purpose. Our diversity isn't our strength. Our unity of mission, our unity of effort is what makes us successful, that we're going all in the same direction. If you're not all going in the same direction, and even worse, if you're trying to go in different directions, that's going to create separation, it's going to create problems, and you're not going to go anywhere successfully.
I think the intent of what you're saying here is the unity is very important in terms of where all of us, where we're going. In the broader context of the civil society, as I was talking about, what are the biggest challenges which are hampering the sanctity of a civil society?
There are a number of challenges that are hurting our society right now. I think if we look at recent technology, such as the internet, such as the amount of information problematic that you can get, I think pornography being distributed through to young children is warping their understanding of sexuality. The challenges of having divorce widespread, rampant, that is more the expectation rather than the expectation being that parents are staying together. and just other forms of immorality are hurting our culture. Furthermore, a lot of the problems within our government is that we're giving out so many handouts. Rather than allowing or encouraging people to work, to be self-sufficient, when you're creating that lack of responsibility, that gets inculcated into the individual. So instead of trying to enable people to be successful, you're weighing the successful members of society down by overburdening them with taxes, with government programs, rather than allowing people to either succeed or fail, but just giving them the resources and the tools and leaving them alone so that they can make that decision for themselves.
And in the whole running of a state, you have a welfare state and you have a commercial state. The commercial state creates economics, creates commerce, which creates prosperity, and part of the role of the commercial state is to support the welfare state. And when the welfare state goes beyond a step of being a safety net, start becoming a handout process, that's probably the line being drawn there, to be that it's an opportunity for people who don't have the safety net. So how do you see the safety net conversation and the handout conversation expands in the American context?
It's something that we need to seriously look at. Right now, our government is over $34 trillion in debt. That means that every man, woman, and child owes $102,000 to the federal deficit. That is completely unsustainable. If we thought of ourselves as a household, if you think of yourself as a 5-person household with a mom, dad, and 3 kids, that house owes $500,000. Any kind of house that owes that kind of money isn't going to be giving out money freely to anyone. They're going to try to get their own house in order. They're going to try to get their own deficit done to pay off whatever debt they have before they help others. And we need to very squarely look in the eyes of the problem that this could totally ruin our country. It's an existential threat. It's an existential crisis, such that if we don't solve it, it could lead to complete economic collapse and collapse of all of our systems. So we need to really hammer that idea into the minds of Americans. That's going to take education. And through that, we have to look at what are the things that we're able to take care of financially. One principle within Catholic social teaching is that of subsidiarity. And subsidiarity means that you do what needs to be done at the lowest level first. Because as the individual, if it's an individual problem, you better know how to answer it than anyone else. As a family, you know how to take care of your family and what problems your family has. When we have welfare done by the federal government, we have people from Alabama, from California, from Alaska, Hawaii, all these different states with all these very different cultures, backgrounds, trying to solve a problem that's not a national problem. It's a local problem. Poverty, that's a local problem. Trying to get health care to individuals, it's not the same size fits all for the federal government. So what we need to do is we need to be shrinking the federal government immensely. Our Constitution stated that if the powers are not enumerated in the Constitution, they belong to the states. We need to take that teaching much more seriously so that we can shrink the federal government, we can get our spending under control, and we can really only spend those things that we need to. And right now, the level of welfare state, it's too much. We need to not totally rip everybody off who's been counting on it, but we need to wean ourselves off and take a hard look at the budget to reduce the spending.
Wow. I want from you to delve onto these two words, these two terms, and then try to, what it means for you. The one word I want you to talk about is statesperson or statesman or stateswoman, and a politician. How do you see these two words mean for you? What do they mean for you? And what are if there are any examples you want to share about them?
So a politician is someone who is working in politics. He's trying to use whatever government influence and position he's in, of power, and also kind of the notoriety that comes with it to achieve a certain end. Now, a statesman is doing that same thing, but the statesman is doing it with a certain sense of dignity. So we need that sense of dignity. We need that kind of civility in order to have that kind of conversation, because right now what we're seeing is a very large bifurcation, a big separation between Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, and liberals. And the problem is that a person can wake up in the morning, and if they're conservative, they can wake up, listen to conservative talk shows, have conservative friends, have conservative family, and never interact with the liberal, and vice versa, the liberal can do the same thing. And as we have the internet, social media, and you're just being fed the information that you want, what's happening is that society is drifting further and further apart, and our values aren't being united. And some of the fighting that we have, when it's not civil, when we lack that ability to have a conversation, we lack the ability to actually convince other people. And as human beings, our intellects are made for truth. So if I were wrong about something, I would want someone to be able to convince me of that. I want to hear the best argument a liberal has to make to try to convince me otherwise. And by understanding their argument, maybe they'll convince me, or maybe I'll understand their position well enough to convince them. So we need statesmen, not politicians that are just going to do fighting unnecessarily, in order to create an environment within the country where we can have that kind of dialogue amongst each other.
And do you think there is a dearth of statesmen and stateswomen in the country and broadly in the society? And then what does it take to create an ecosystem to have more good people coming up and saying that I want to run for office and I want to do good for my communities?
So it's tricky, right? Because on the one hand, you want to have statesmen and you want to be as civil as you possibly can be, but on the other hand, it's very hard to move forward and get along with people when their ideas are often evil. And I think that right now, for a Republican to not understand that there's a fight between good and evil right now, if they think it's just the differences of opinions, then they're missing the point. So as civil as you can be, but how can you be as civil when we have abortion rampant, when the liberals are running on the theme of abortion, on the ability for a mother to kill her own child? Where's the middle ground there? If it's completely wrong, and if you accept that as wrong, and you see that there have been over 60 million babies killed, murdered since Roe v. Wade, the abolishment of it, that's a genocide. So it's so hard to find that kind of middle ground. So you need to be staunchly for your principles. You need to be a fighter. We don't need people who go to Congress, end up being wet blankets. But it's a challenge, and I commend anyone in politics who's trying to do it. But I would stress fight first, statesmen next, because right now I think our country we're facing multiple existential crises right now.
My concluding question to you is, if you have to have three topics or three things to be changing in your society or your communities, what would they be?
I think the three existential crises facing the United States right now are the border, the economy, along with the federal debt, and the threat of World War III. These three things need to be, first and foremost, the things that are tackled by members of Congress. And if any Republican doesn't identify them as the top issue, they shouldn't be given any kind of consideration. However, even though these are the existential crises that our country is facing, I think one issue that we've forgotten, and the threat to the soul of the country, is what happened over COVID, where we had our country got flipped over. We were supposed to be a country where the people govern themselves, but we became a country where the administrative state, the politicians, the elites are governing and trying to direct and rule the people. We saw this through big media controlling information. We saw this through big pharma lying about the efficacy of certain drugs and forcing people to take certain ones. We saw this through the government being weaponized against conservatives in kicking them out of their jobs or making it where they couldn't succeed or live in life. And that's where I think we have those three issues that are existential crises, but soon after that we need to fight for the soul of the country, and that's addressing what happened during COVID and holding those people who are responsible for these atrocities accountable.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you, John.
Thank you.